Good morning,
Morning,
everybody. Morning, Rob. Thanks, Josh, for joining us again, mate. Nice to see you.
Nice to be here, mate.
Right then, our favourite subject today. Well,
pH is king.
One of pH is king, is it? That is the question. We shall see. Weekend going all right so far, boys?
Yeah. I've had Paul round. Fish Palace came round, didn't he, this week? Dropped me off a massive Avatar chalice.
All right, yeah. You chopped it up, yeah?
I know you're keen on it, Tom.
Stop it. Nothing wrong with chalices. Anyway.
No, I haven't.
Not accurate.
No. I've moved it to the back of the tank, but
you'd have to look at it.
I put it at the front, and then I realised exactly where I put it is where I siphon out all my detritus. So it acted like a cup, just collecting tang poo, basically.
Fair enough.
Kill it eventually. So yeah, I've moved it over to get a bit more, just to get flow across the top of it, so nothing settles on it really. I think that's about all I've done this week, really.
Large corals do look class, though. I'll give you that. I'll give him that. You can grow them, to be fair. You've got patience, haven't you?
The
patience.
He came in with a Red Sea salt bucket, and I took the lid off, and it was literally the size of the Red Sea salt bucket. I was like, oh my God. Yeah, so it was larger than I was expecting. So,
could have fetched it in a Domino's pizza box for you.
Yeah, could have. Yeah.
Oh dear. So other than that, nothing else on the in the fish house, fish room, or laboratory, should I call it?
Not in the fish. I've had a guy around to quote me for my solar, so I think I'm going to go ahead with that. I'm going to get about, I think he said he can get about 6 kilowatt solar array on my roof. So I'm going to do that. I mean, it won't touch the sides of what I use, but it'll probably maybe knock 20 to 30% off the yearly bill, I guess. So
every little helps, mate, as they say.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I thought.
And where are you with the spawning? With your project tank, where are you with that?
I'm reasonably close to setting it up. I think I've got everything I need, actually. I just need to get the time to actually put it all together, get the sump in, and then enclose it all in. I've got all the T-slot alley. I've got the plastic sheeting to, make it all dark and whatever. So I'm kind of 90% there. It's just finding the time at the moment. I mean, I know you think I've got all the time in the world, Tom. I've got DIY projects going on. That's they're taking me away from what I want to do. But you got to keep your partner happy. So
I do. Well, I haven't got one this weekend. Me and the dog. So yeah.
Nice.
So yeah, Lee's coming around in a bit to play around with pH Pros, which we're going to talk about this morning. Josh just disappeared for a minute, so
I'm still here in the background, don't worry.
Oh, you're in the background. All right, okay.
Yeah, still.
Lee's dropping in on Wednesday. Did he tell you?
Who is?
Lee. He's coming down on Wednesday.
Oh yeah, he is. He's going to get his zebra that he reserved from AAC, isn't he? That's right. I was going to come with him. To be fair, but it's a long way.
So he's probably going to for a cup of tea and a coffee or whatever, and have a look at the tank and chat rubbish for an hour or so before he goes back.
An hour? There's no reefer on this channel or in this audience that could ever say that they have just gone to their missus or their spouse and gone, I'm just nipping around to so-and-so's, I'll be about an hour. Yeah, all right. Yeah. Several hours, 3 days later.
I was going to say, I've got some spare room so he can stay over.
And that's what the LFSs used to be. That's what I would keep banging on about. I'll not go down that road this morning, but it used to be like that. Anyway, Josh, good weekend so far, mate. Anything to report?
Nothing tank-wise. Just trying to, obviously we're focusing on pH today. I've been sort of paying a bit more close attention to mine. Obviously how hot it's been. We've had the windows wide open all week, and instead of having I think we're getting an extra full point of increase. We've been going from about 8.25 as a high up to about, it was nearly 8. I think it was 8.39 yesterday. So the hot weather's done some favors for me. I've had a little play around with flow as well. I wasn't fully happy with how things were moving around in the tank, so I'm trying to have a little play with that, see if I can get a little bit more of an optimum movement of water, shall we say, around the tank. Other than that, nothing really exciting to report there. I've had the joys of what's been going on in Sunderland happening on Friday night, but other than that, yeah, pretty calm week.
Good. Well, I've got to find somewhere to put this today, and I know people might say they've got a good idea where I could put it. Thanks for that. But yeah,
right shelf as well.
Yeah, right shape. Dark conversation. Too early. It's only 6 minutes past 10, Rob. Yeah, we're gonna have a play around with that, I think, today at some point. But yeah, we're going to sort the pH probes out, hopefully, when Lee gets over in a bit. So,
what was that pump anyway? What make is that?
This is, to be fair, it's one of Liam, Gill's Aquarium, bless him. Fetched it around the other day. It's a Jecod, EOW22M. It apparently maxes out at 22,000 litres an hour. It's got some oomph. Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's pretty big. It's just that's the downside, because it's a bit ugly.
Yeah,
I don't really, So I'm trying to think where I'm going to try it in the back left hand corner. But yeah, I might not get round to it.
I don't think anything that pushes that much can look pretty, can it? It's not possible.
Can you get round the back of your tank, Tom? Like, is it easy access?
No, it isn't. It isn't. I have to do. It's a bit embarrassing what I have to do, and this didn't really think much about this when I had it done. But so I put a false back in the sump, which I thought was a really good idea for hiding a lot of the cables, if you can sort of picture it. Yeah. But the main negative to that, if you think about it, is what do I do if a magnet drops off the back of the tank?
So it's just access. Yeah.
Can't get to it. So what I have to do with all the magnets, and don't worry, Liam, if you're watching, I'll say hello to everybody in a minute. I'm not going to do it to Liam because he has lent it me to see how we go on. But with the Neptune WAVs that I use, because I've got 6 of them in there at the minute, I have to drill a really small hole, not through the magnet, through the plastic sort of moulding that holds the magnet in place, and I have to tie fishing line to it and tie them to the pipework at the back of the tank. So if I ever take the power head off to clean it and the magnet just drops off, I've got it hanging like a yo-yo behind the back of the tank. So I just literally pull it up with the fishing wire. Well, I had to come up with something because I just kept losing them, and they're like 60 quid for the replacement for 2 magnets. They're ridiculous for my Apex. Well, you have to buy the front and the back magnet. You can't just buy the back, obviously, and it's like 60 quid. So yeah. So I've got two spare WAVs in the garage that I can't use because I've had to nick the magnets off them because I've dropped 2 down here. Anyway, so yeah, we're going to play around with. Hopefully, we're going to get the Apex pH probe sorted, which I tried yesterday. And as I said when we first came on, I was getting rather frustrated with it. Calibrates at 7, but won't calibrate at 10. God knows why. Anyway, let's say good morning to everybody who has had the decency, or should I say, the time, effort. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Morning, Gaza. Thanks for joining us, mate. Hope you're having a good weekend so far, buddy. Johnny boy, looking forward to seeing you at the barbecue if you can make it still. Have you figured out it's too far yet, Rob, for you?
I did have a look on the map. It's a bit of a slack.
It is a bit of a slack. Same for George. He came down.
Just 3 hours.
Lee, morning, mate. UKM 120, morning. Thanks for joining us. Rennie's Reef, morning, buddy. Hope you're well. Dave, hope you're doing well, mate. And yeah, I need to get you that information that you asked me for about the ICP. Keep forgetting. I'll do that today. Who else we got? Dave Bensley, nice to see you, mate. Not spoke to you for a few weeks. Hope you're doing well, mate. Yeah, he's your way, isn't he, Dave?
He is, good lad is Dave.
Rama, morning. Who else we got in the house? Jupiter's Reef, morning to you. And we've got good old Critical, morning Reefs, just a quick hello for me. Kid's birthday party. Catch up live stream later. Have a good one. Thanks, mate. Hope you have a good time. The weather's kind to you. Liam, morning all. And yes, PH is king. Yeah, big advocate. Oh God, that didn't take long. Yeah, Mr. Chips is here. Thank you, Rama.
I haven't watched that yet, actually.
No, you need to watch that. MS Reef, morning MS Reef. It was quite a funny one. If you like laughing at me at my expense anyway. Carl, hope you're all right, mate. Hope you're still on the mend. And I think we are there. So 21 people, 22 people join us. Thank you very much. So, it's PH King.
Just reading, sorry, but his dog tried to eat his rats off the floor this morning. But he's put it back in, and it looks good. And
where are we?
I mean, good start to your Sunday morning.
Yeah. Wow.
Close.
Wow. Okay. So, PH then. What do we know about it?
I'll let you talk the science. I'll let you talk the sciencey part.
That's just complete silence. The three of us like, oh, who's going? I'll let you start, Tom, because you're the big advocate of pH.
Throw him under the bus. Let him have it.
Yeah, it's his baby, this one.
Well, so you two are just coming along for the ride, are you? Right. Well, I did have some notes, but they're on my other computer, ironically, so I'm going to have to wing this one. So, pH. Well, I think we'd all agree that there are benefits to running high pH on a reef tank, and we've all seen benefits, or I certainly have, over the last sort of, I'd say, 12 months, 18 months. And I fell onto that, or onto the pH wagon from a bit of YouTube watching. So like Mr. Meckley, obviously. And it was a cheaper way for me to dose alkalinity, calcium to an extent in the garage when I had a lot of stuff in the garage rather than 3-part, on dosing lines. So that's kind of how I fell into it. Did I see an added benefit of running IPH? Yes. I saw growth in corals literally in the space of days rather than weeks, which some people watching might think I'm talking out my backside, but I actually did. You know, tips and just general health, coloration, everything seemed to be better. So I wouldn't say I planned on doing it. I kind of stumbled on it, and once I did it, once I've sort of played around with it, I've never looked back. So, I mean, that was how I got into the pH bus train, whatever you want to call it. I think it's a lot more important than people think about. I mean, you look at, obviously, the ocean. I mean, I know, obviously, we talk about acidification or, you know, in the ocean, and its pH is a lot lower than it used to be, however many hundreds of years ago. But it's such a vital part in the, you know, the whole ecosystem on the planet, never mind in our tanks. And I think the more that people realise it's a parameter you should be paying attention to, equally, I think it's as important as salinity, personally. I think I really do think it's up there. Because if you're going to have, I think it's what, for me, pH is, I say this all the time, and again, you guys jump in and correct me if you think differently, but I just think that running an high pH on a reef tank gives you a lot more, you've got a lot more margin for error with things. You've got a lot, it's a lot more forgiving. Your reef tank can tolerate a lot more swings, I think, if you run a higher pH. And I think you will get away with more accidents if you run a high pH as opposed to a low one or a suppressed one. I think sometimes running a lower. Would you agree with that, or would you both think differently?
Yeah, I mean, a higher pH does act as a buffer, so it does give you more room for error, I guess, than it would if you're running at 7.9s and things. So I do agree with that. I'm not sure I'd say it was as important as salinity. I think that might.
Well, I think salinity. Slightly. No, I think salinity definitely, but I would say after salinity, I look at my pH after salinity and temp.
Yeah. I mean,
I do anyway.
I didn't actually chase pH per se, but I just implemented dosing on my size tank, which was going to be a cheap solution, and the kind of side effect to what I dosed is a decent pH, because obviously calc, we know, gives you a good big pH pump, and sodium hydroxide, which I also dose, does exactly the same. So I wasn't necessarily chasing high pH. I was just trying to work out the cheapest way to run my tank. And it just so happens that the cheapest methods also give you that pH bump, which most people like. I mean, the thing about pH is you haven't got your notes here, have you? But it's a base 10 log scale, basically. So when you go from 7 to 8, that's not just an increase of 1, it's a magnitude of.
Yeah.
So even when people go, I've only got like a 0.1 bump in pH, that is a significant difference. So so small numbers do matter when it comes to pH, really. So if you can bump it even a small bit, you're going to get some benefit from it. It's just
I think
how much.
I think a lot of people get confused with that log scale as well, Rob. It's a good point you've made there, because I think a lot of people are under the impression that 0.1 might be 10 times more than the previous value, and then 10 times more. And when you add the numbers up, people are thinking that a bump of 0.3 is potentially 100 times higher than they think it's more potentially than what it is.
Oh, sorry.
So you will have there will be people that aren't aware that it's a log scale, so they do just think it is nothing. And then you also there's a bit of misinformation that I've heard where people have gone the other way and they've dramatically overstated how much of an impact it is, and then I think people get a little bit concerned. It's something we talked about before we came on, talked about the pushing the boundaries and getting up to sort of the levels you might have been hitting, Tom, the 8.7s and things like that. So I think that, again, is something that we'll touch on. But it is important to understand how that scale works. And I think you've made a good point with that, Rob.
Yeah.
So how did you get into pH then, Josh? How did you stumble on it?
I was very similar to yourself, mate. Again, watching a lot of the social media influencers and having their input. So I think two of the big people for me were Keith at Reefbum and Sonny Hariali of Reefsite. Both got phenomenal systems, been in the hobby for decades and have used calc for decades, had massive success with it. And for me, they're the sort of people that I look to emulate. So if it was working for them, it was going to work for me. There's been a lot of talk about how important pH was, being someone that's relatively new in the hobby still. I've only been in sort of reef side of things for about 5 years now. Taking on their advice and listening to what they had to say was really important. So I spent a lot of time trying to find out what was best. And obviously when people are talking about the higher pH, I thought, well, it's something that in reality I need to sort of direct my focus on. I went down the calc route. I'll go into it a bit later about sort of the pros and cons. I've got a bit of an opinion on calc of it's great until it's not. And it sounds a bit of a daft saying, but when you look at some of the downfalls of it, a lot of them are user related, I'll be completely honest. It does pose the question as to whether or not it is in the long run going to be beneficial to you. But we can talk about that one a little bit later on. But for me, it was a case of what are the successful reefers who have been doing it for a long period of time doing, and for a lot of them it was calcwasser and targeting higher pH. So I thought, well, if they're saying it works, then I'll trust their judgment and I'll jump on the bandwagon as well.
Yeah, fair enough. A few more people have joined us, so just quick hello, shout out. Excuse me. Southeast Reefer, thanks for joining us, mate. Happy Sunday to you. Having a good weekend. The one and only Mr. Tim Raper. Nice to meet you, mate. Nice to have you with us this morning. Wakefield Reefer, and we've got somebody else. No, two more. But no, thanks for joining us. So, pros and cons then. Should we go pros and cons, or do you want to talk about different ways of increasing pH? Which one do you want to go with first, gentlemen?
Just go through the mechanisms of what people use
Methods.
to try and boost it, I guess. I mean, I go through basically what I do. I bring my airline in for my skimmer from the outside. Yeah. I like to use simple things that are not going to be things that I need to replace weekly. So I don't use the CO2 scrubber because I think on my size system it just costs me a fortune and I'd have to change it out too often. So I just run an airline from the outside straight into the feed of my skimmer. I dose calc to my maximum evaporation rate, and I dose sodium hydroxide to kind of take up the slack that the calc can't do.
So sorry to butt in. I'm just gonna for people that are watching this, I'm just for the benefit of other people. So a CO2 scrubber, I'm sure most people are aware of what they are. But for anybody that isn't, look a little bit like these that you can find. Yeah. So we've got, so it's an acrylic canister, isn't it, really? You can get smaller ones like that one.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you see this on screen up there? You get the larger ones, can't you? So you fill that with the meat. You fill that with the media, or you can use an RO canister. Fill that with the media, and that will absorb any CO2 going into your skimmer line, should I say, or air lining. Yeah. So that's one way you can do it.
And they change colour, don't they? As it.
And they change colour, sorry, as the media depletes, so you know when to exchange it. Yeah, so that's one option that your people can use. What would you say? Do you use one of these, Rob? Sorry, Josh, do you use one?
Yes, yeah, I do. Okay. There is a noticeable difference. There's no two ways about it because, especially during the winter when you've got your windows closed, there's less daylight. So, I mean, I'm digressing a little bit. My house my flat is absolutely rammed full of plants. I think there's 50 odd plants in it. So during the day, we've got a massive boost from that. So, but at night, it's particularly important, I think, because you've got there's obviously we're in the house and the windows are closed. The plants aren't producing oxygen. So to have that on is beneficial to me to make sure I don't have that really big drop at night. I have modified it just slightly in that, tried to sort of, in a way, trying to copy what Devon did from Reef Dudes. He did the recirculating style. So he's got his main CO2 scrubbers in the loft of his house. And then he's also got, I think it's like a bowl basically that he's inverted and glued to the top of the skimmer lid. And he's teed it off. So basically he's pulling in some fresh air and he's also pulling in recirculating air, like the air through the skimmer. So it doesn't exhaust the media so fast. So I've not done that per se, but I've closed off all of the air holes, barring one which I've fed an airline through and sort of filled the gap so that there's no other. And then I fed that line down to the opening of my CO2 scrubber. So the air that's being pulled in is going to be air from the skimmer, but then also fresh air coming in as well. I've noticed that I would say it's the rate at which I'm using the media up has dropped by at least a third, if not more. It has had a massive benefit in terms of cost saving, and it doesn't make any difference to dropping the pH or raising it anymore. It keeps it as stable as it did before. But obviously, like you were saying, Rob, there's a big cost implication with it. That was one way that I've got around having it run out so fast. So yeah, it's been quite good for me.
So what sort of, just for people watching then, again, I'm just, sorry, Rob, we'll come back to you now you use it. So what would you say in terms of a increase of you seen by you? I mean, everybody's got different houses, different tanks, different, air circulation, etc. How's that benefited you? Give us any numbers or sort of increase.
I had it run out a few weeks back. I said it probably a bit more than that actually. I had it run out about a little while ago, and the only reason I was aware it had run out, I hadn't looked at it. The only reason I was aware of it is when I looked at my pH graph on my DHL. I've dropped by about 0.15 overnight. I noticed that the low had all of a sudden got a lot lower. And like I say, like we were saying, it's logarithmic scale, so 0.15 is quite a significant drop. I'd noticed that it was consistently down every night, and then the high wasn't as high as well. So immediately started thinking, well, what's caused that? Had a little look, and sure enough, the media had exhausted, changed it out, and over the next few days, it came back up again. So it's not a massive increase, but in terms of numerical value, but if we're looking at how much of an actual physical impact it has, that 0.15 is important. If we're going from I'm about 7.95 is my low at the minute for night. So if we're getting down to the 7.8, it's sort of touching the border of getting a bit dangerous. So I really wanted to avoid that. Yeah.
Okay. So you're an advocate of the CO2 scrubber then?
Yeah, okay. Definitely. I mean, it's a costly bit of kit, especially if you've got bigger tanks like yourself. To me, it's not so bad. I've only got 200 litres of water sat there, so there's not as much needs scrubbing, shall we say. But I mean, the skimmer I'm using is rated, I think, for about 185 gallons, whereas this is only 50. So the amount of draw on that media is more than what it needs to be, but it's because there's other things I'm not doing, like calc is something I used to do, I'm not anymore. So I need that extra air input and air exchange to try and, balance things out now.
Because this is one that I found for anybody with the CO2 scrubber, because I kept buying that media and it was getting a bit expensive. I used this on mine, Not exactly this one, but it's Medistock Spherosorb, or Spherosorbs, pronouncing it right. £19.50 for 5 litres. So if you do shop around, you can get stuff a little bit cheaper than getting it from your LFS.
That's the one. That's the one I get. That's the exact same one.
That's one I use.
That lasts me probably about 2 months, maybe 2 or 3 months, something like that. And I've got, I think it's about 2 litres of media because I've repurposed an old reactor. And yeah, I'd say I think this reactor body's about 2 litres, so that'll last me 2 or 3 months.
Can you reactivate that media or not? Or is it just
not that I'm aware? I probably can somehow, but I don't think we can do it at home.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's a good option. I suppose you can't run an airline to the outside then, Josh. Is that why you're using the scrubber?
Could do, but with it being a rented flat, there'd probably be issues with me putting holes in things to get the airline outside. I could try and run it through the vents at the top of the window, but then I'm going to have airline running around the flat. And even though the window is only just sort of there round the corner, if I had some airline, I'm sure the other half would be spitting a dummy out of the airlines. Round the front room.
So I mean, they're a good option for people that can't, physically run an airline. Because probably most people can't, to be honest, can they? Where their tanks are situated, you can't just start.
Without drilling through external bricks, which you don't want to be doing, do you?
No, not really. Yeah, so they're a good option for that. So, I mean, sorry,
Rob, we went off the tangent there. I just think it was worth talking about for people who've never maybe know what they are and how much they cost, etc., what they do. So go on, sorry.
So as I say, so I just pull in the air straight from the outside, the fresh air, so to speak. So I mean, the other thing to obviously remember about skimmers is they don't preferentially take CO2 out of your water. So all they're trying to do is equilibrate the water with the air that's surrounding your tank, basically. So I know a lot of people always go, a skimmer will put O2 into my water, or it will take CO2 out of the water, but it will do the absolute reverse as well. So it can put CO2 into your water as well in the right circumstances, because all it's trying to do is equilibrate your water with the atmospheric air. So if you've got a lot of CO2 in the air and not in the tank, it's going to do the opposite effect of what you want. That's why you're putting it in, because obviously the CO2 in normal atmospheric air is only at 0.04, isn't it? So it's really low. That's why you're so that's why you're pulling it from the fresh air. So basically that's all I do, because that's just a very simple thing for me to run an airline to the skimmer. And as I say, I dose calc, which 25 degrees is going to have a pH of 12.4, and I mix up sodium hydroxide, which just one other tiny thing about that pH scale is, I know like nearly everyone it goes from 0 to 14, but that's not technically correct, because you can have a minus pH. So a really strong hydrochloric acid can have a pH of -1, and a really strong mixture of sodium hydroxide can have a pH of 15. So it's not from 0 to 14. Just, I know most people think that is the scale, but it is either side of that. So, and I use a 4 molar solution mixed up of sodium hydroxide, which is pretty potent. I think it's got a pH of 13.6. I think it works out that.
Wow.
And I just add, I add 70 mils into 3,000 litres, and it gives me a 0.1 pH boost from 70 mils. I mean, it's absolutely potent.
Quick question for you here. Does it make much of a difference using your outside air?
Yes, not as much as the calc or the sodium hydroxide, but it's probably like 0.5 or 0.05 rather of a bump. It's not massive, but it's one of those things, because it's just easy. I've fitted the tube and that's it. I'm done. I don't have to do anything else. Don't have to maintain it. So to get any increase for something that simple, it's really it's worth the effort to do. So and that's the trouble with my fish room is, unlike you guys with houses, I have no windows at all in my fish room. It's completely enclosed. So I have to all the air circulation in and out. I have to kind of do it manually with fans and extractors, and so I think that's why. Because my pH was dropping down to 7.8 at night, and I was just like, it's just too low, really. So I was aiming to get it up. Ideally, I wanted it to not drop below 8. So now it tends to go to about 8.1 to 8.3. That's the sort of the 24-hour swing, and I'm happy with that, really. So I don't think I would. I think to get it any further, I'd have to really start putting a lot of effort in and a lot of time, and it's not really. It's good enough for me not to bother to put any more effort into it.
I think that's an important one, though, isn't it? As well, it goes back to what we were saying last week. Yeah, if you're doing too much, it becomes a drag, becomes a chore, and then you might end up not doing it. That's something I'll come on to in a minute with calc. For me, it ended up being a bit of a draw, and then obviously, you neglect it a little bit. So I think if it works for you and it gets the results you want, then it's sort of the perfect solution. I
mean, I think the only other thing I did consider for a while was running a Refugium, because I actually fitted a satellite sort of tank in my system, and the idea of me putting that in there was to run a Refugium on it at night just to stop that dip. But then I just kind of went off Refugiums because they always just collect lots of gunk, don't they, and Aptasia breeding grounds, and then they rip out some of the traces.
I was about to say that. Yeah.
No, and I was just like, I just never bothered in the end. But I mean, it's going to work really well for some people. And the other thing, obviously, you're meant to scale it to the size of your tank, and so my Refugium would have been. I was just like, it needs to be too big to have, I think, any significant effect on it. So I didn't bother.
Your Fusion have to have been my tank, basically. I'm going to guess.
Is Refugium that big enough? Koi carp in it, a sundial in the middle, a water fountain, and some plastic ducks on the top. But just before we get on to you, Josh, sorry, and how you use it, I'm just going to read some of these comments out, please. So, what's Dave saying? My opinion is it's just that pH affects the growth more than the coloration. Well, anything, there is so many elements to that statement with other parameters to make growth. Okay, do we agree with that? Yeah,
I would say so.
Yeah. Okay. And Liam's saying, I think 8 to 8.3 is more important than higher 8.3 above. I tried to flatten the low point of my pH rather than chase the number. Chasing the number ended up with high calcium. Yeah, I know that feeling. I did that as well. I don't know whether that's Doug, but morning if it is. Thanks for joining us. Those IPH solutions come with some serious side effects. You get short-term improvement, but you're storing up problems for the medium to long term. Don't know what he's talking about.
Do you want to elaborate on that one in the comments?
Yeah, I might want to elaborate in there. I'd be interested to know what he's going to say about that. If he's still watching, it'd be good if you could, mate. Be nice to know. Thank you. John's saying, why pay that much for a screw? It was just the first one I picked, John, on the eBay while we're talking about it. But yeah, for anybody that wants to do a DIY one, you can use the RO canister, a lot cheaper. They are. Lee's saying high pH equals high alk, low pH equals low alk. The less alkaline the water, the water low, that drops close to neutral. The water makes it more acidic. After grows to grow, basically. Yeah. Agree with that point?
It's all about like, sort of ridding the hydrogen atoms, isn't it, from the coral skeleton? If the amount, so basically a lower pH is more hydrogen in the water. So, like you were talking before, Rob, about a skimmer balancing out the air with the air in your room. It's a similar concept. It's about moving from high to low concentration. So if you've got more hydrogen in the water than is necessary, the coral is going to struggle to get rid of it, and thus will stunt growth. And then obviously, if you have much less, which is going to be a higher pH, you're then going to end up with much faster growth because the coral can get rid of that hydrogen much quicker. So, yes, there is an element with alkalinity there, but I think we have to just focus primarily on the hydrogen side of things. It's just moving from that low to, or that high to low concentrations. If you've got a low concentration in the water, you're going to be able to move it out faster, so the coral will grow faster. The simplest way of putting it, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. I'd agree with you on that, definitely. Question for you, Rob, from Liam. Are you dosing neat or diluted? I'm assuming he's on about your hydroxides. Yeah.
Well, it's diluted. Yeah, because they come in pellets, so you have to obviously put it into RO water.
Oh.
So I make, like I said, I make a 4 molar solution of it. So I don't know if anyone knows how to make molar solutions, but
no, you need to do a video on it. That's your job with all that spare time you have on your hands. What's Gaza put? He had an increase from 8.1 to 8.5. Wow.
Yeah, I mean that's impressive.
Wow, that's a lot. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. How simple is that?
Must be from the skimmer, right? Has anybody ever had any problems? Because I've heard a bit of a, I don't know, it's a wives' tale or myth, whatever, about this time of year with pollen, and if people live near fields that might have like insecticides on them or whatever that farmers use, and getting in the air and skimmers pulling it into the tank and having issues in the tank. No, I'm talking out the old.
No, I think I've heard similar. It's not something I've ever really paid much attention to because, I don't pull air from the outside, so I'm not overly concerned. I think there are a lot of different potential pollutants that you could be pulling in. I live right next door to a car garage who regularly burn off their waste at the back, so I wouldn't want to be pulling in anything that they're burning off. That's one of the reasons that I don't do it. And I think you're probably right in that the growth phase for a lot of farms is the summer, so they're going to be spraying more insecticides to keep things off of crops. So anything that can get airborne that we don't want in tanks is potentially going to be risky. I know that there are some insecticides that are absolutely lethal to marine life. So there is the chance, but then you're going to have to ask the question: are the insecticides they're using on farms going to be that deadly to marine life, knowing that you're going to be having runoff into
breathing
rivers?
it in yourself and breathing it in yourselves,
and running off into rivers and things like that? I think if they are using them and they get caught out, they're going to be ending up with it's a pretty hefty fine, so it might end up counteracting the point of even trying to keep the crops safe.
I mean, you can run your intake through a carbon. Like you can put carbon, maybe same to do with a scrubber and run it through carbon. And they also, I don't know, my skimmer also has a filter sort of block in it. I don't know if yours has got that. It's like a foam filter. So any pollen or particulate particles that get pulled through the air, they get pulled out anyway. I guess that's a little bubble king thing, is it?
I think my old I'm trying to think what the nano skimmer was had on the Max Nano. I can't think what it was now. I think it was a Tunesy one. That had a little bit of foam in the silencer. I don't know if that was more for noise than filtration, but it will have that double effect if there's any sort of substantial particles, any moisture there, it's going to stick to it. So it will have a benefit.
I'll take it out and clean it, every couple of months, just give it a rinse under the tap and stuff.
So we've also got Mick at MBM. Morning. Thanks for joining us. He's saying, see if Doug get back to us. I think Doug's commented, which I'll get onto in a minute. And Rory's Reef has also joined us. Morning to you. Thanks for joining, Rory's Reef. He's saying the bolus method. That's what Doug is referring to. Right. So Doug is saying IPH solutions, carbonates and hydroxides, cause a large amount of precipitation. As precipitation forms, drags out organics, nutrients, and fluoride and vital trace elements into that. Right. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
That's not my calc.
I was going to say that's just depends on. I think size of the system makes difference and how much. I mean, in terms of sodium hydroxide, like I said, I'm dosing 70 mils into 3,000 litres. So I can't see it having massive negative effects on that amount of water. Plus I do water changes. But everyone's got their own ways of doing things. I mean, at the end of the day, calc has tried and tested for decades. So that, my counter argument is so all of those people have been doing it wrong. That's just...
right, okay.
I think we might have some. Sorry, mate, go on. I'll let you finish what Rob.
No, I was just reading out what Doug's saying. Thanks for your comments, Doug. That precipitation ends up creating all sorts of problems. We see in the ICPs, the precipitation on the surfaces creates large amounts of bacteria that produce organic acids. High amounts of those acids then render it harder and harder to maintain a good pH. Also, traces are impossible to maintain stable. Interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Interesting.
What does
you were saying? I think it was you just said it then, Rob, that whichever one of you just said it then about people using it historically, using calc historically, have always had good results with it. I think there is the side of it where we get drawn into looking too deep potentially. We're looking at, I think ICPs weren't a thing 10 years ago. No one would have been aware that the calc would have had that knock-on side effect.
That knock-on side.
Now we know it. You can attribute potentially some failures to it. We don't know for certain whether or not they are the reason. I'm trying to think who it was. There's another reefer on social media who's got a massive tank. I can't think who it was now. He basically stopped dosing calc because of he'd had a power outage, and then I think all of what was being bound up. I remember. I can't think who it was.
I remember that. I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it basically the drop in pH he had meant that a lot of the bound up, I think it was phosphates and a few other traces, got re-released back into the water.
Yeah,
spiked a lot of things, and he had quite a lot of loss as a result of it. That was the first catalyst for me stopping the calc, was being up, because I wasn't aware of it until that point. A lot of people talk about all the benefits, but no one talks about the drawbacks. I think, like obviously Doug's pointed out there, we see it in ICPs now, so we have a little bit of a wider scope of understanding, so it allows us to know, some of the negatives, and we can actually, make a bit more of an informed decision, shall we say, on it.
It's like everything in this hobby, isn't it? There's no perfect silver bullet for running a tank. Every single thing you put in your tank, if you dose it wrongly, it's going to be harmful. Even your salt you put in, you put too much salt in, you'll kill everything. Yeah. So it's just, I understand what you're saying. And the ICPs are obviously giving us more information and understanding better. And probably when guys are running calc in the 90s, they weren't keeping the variety of corals that they're keeping nowadays.
No,
I guess the diversity of what we can keep is much greater now. Maybe that's why we're moving forward. But my argument is I can't afford to run most of those things that those companies make on 3,000 litre tanks. They're just stupidly expensive. It's as simple as that. If I had to pay 400 or 500 quid a month to dose a 3-part from whatever company, I wouldn't have the tank. So I'm not I haven't really got a massive amount of options, if I'm honest.
Yeah. Interesting. Right, Josh, before we forget, come on, talk to us about your pH experience in your system.
So, I think calc was the first sort of thing I dipped my toes in with. Excuse me. Calc was the first thing I dipped my toes in with, just mainly because, like I said, I'd seen a lot of stuff on social media, and calc seemed to be the way to go with it. I initially set it up on a doser, on a Versa doser, because I could dose it continuously, and that was on the Max Nano when I first started it, and it was beneficial. It did work. It did have a little bit of a boost. The growth wasn't massively improved, and I think that was largely down to lack of maintenance or other things that I wasn't doing well with that tank, with it being such a small tank. Swings were massive, in a very short period of time. Moving over to this tank, I went down they pretty much copied what Sonny was doing, Reef Site. Did the calc and did the chocolate marin all for reef. It was fine at first, but then again, it's user error, and this is something that is one of the reasons why I decided to stop it. So and this one bugbear I do have with the Versa, you don't get push notifications when your containers are empty. So I had a set volume, and I would let it run. And there were 1 or 2 times where I'd noticed the pH had dropped, look, and sure enough, the calc's down at its lowest level. It was empty, the container, basically. Again, that's a user error issue. But like you were saying before, Rob, it has to fit your life. If, let's say, I've not paid attention to it, gone away for a few days, come back, and it's run dry, it's affecting not only your parameters, it's affecting your pH. And if you've got any sort of settling out in the bottom, it's going to start dragging those solids into the tank, which is something I wanted to avoid. I know people are quite big on slurry, but for me, it just seemed like an unnecessary risk, so I didn't want to go down that route. So I had that issue with that. I basically had a floating intake tube. I basically made a float and put the tube down the middle, so it was about an inch below the water surface, so that I was never taking in the stuff from the bottom. I think there was one time where it flipped over when I was refilling it, didn't realise, was just drawing in air. Again, user error. Had that happen. I had the doser fail at one point because the old style of sort of tubing internally, the plastic connection broke on the inside. So again, was drawing in air. And then the final straw was when I decided I didn't want to use the doser anymore, I started putting it onto the ATO, and I actually had a much bigger bump with using the ATO. And I don't know whether that was due to the fact that when the ATO was finished running, it was dumping the water back into the container, so it was stirring up the excess at the bottom, potentially raising the pH again, which was, might have been a benefit, or whether or not dosing the larger amount in a small period of time rather than dripping it in was giving me a better pH boost. I don't know. But that alleviated the issue of the container running dry, because if the container ran dry, the ATO would start beeping and tell me. So that was a benefit to start with until I was on a night shift and the other half heard it beeping, switched it off as she normally does. But normally she tells me when she switched it off, so then I'll fix it in the morning. She didn't tell me, and about 3 days later, I was like, why are the micro bubbles coming in off the return pump? Looked, and the return chamber was pretty much empty. To which point I realized she'd turned the ATO off, and I thought, can't run the risk really of having the pH swing, the ALK swing, the calcium swing. So at that point I thought I'll have to find other solutions to pH, and accept that the pH is going to be a little bit lower and move away from calc. So yeah, the scrubber was something that I've run for a long time as well, but the focus was going to be primarily on that, increase the size of the skimmer so that it is driving more air in, try and have the windows open more often. All the plants in the room as well, they'll help keep the oxygen levels in the room higher than potentially what a normal person's room would be. But yeah, and then obviously I started finding out about the different negatives with calc, the binding up of phosphates and other trace elements. So I just thought it's one of those, when I said earlier that it works until it doesn't. It doesn't work when your container runs dry. There was no push notifications. If you're using a 3-part or 4-part like I am now, I've got a much longer period of time where I don't have to worry about the container, and I can get down to that last 100 mils and I'm still going to have 10 days, and I'll have noticed by that point because I have enough interaction with the tank to notice. Whereas a 30-litre container, if I'm using 1.5 litres of calc a day, you get 5 litres left, you think, oh, that's fine. 3 days later you've got nothing left in the container, and it's quite a quick window in which if you miss it, you're going to end up with a lot of swings in the tank. And I think I did notice the negatives of that. So yeah, that was the reason why I sort of stopped doing that. But it was massively beneficial to the pH. And I'd like the same with what you had, Tom. I noticed some really incredible growth with some of the corals, especially when I switched it over to the ATO. When I noticed that pH bumped up a little bit more again, the growth was fantastic, and I honestly was over the moon with it. But it was one of those, it's like, do I accept some really good growth in the short term, but then risk lots of swings and lots of bound up elements and phosphates? Or do I just go, I'm going to have to be patient, which we all need to be in this hobby, let's be honest, be patient, accept the slower growth rates, but potentially in the long term have healthier corals. So that was sort of the deciding factor, really. It wasn't fitting in properly with how I wanted to run the tank, because it was, if I'd forgotten about it, I'd end up with negative results. I thought, well, I'll have to move away from that and move on to something that potentially is a little bit safer and a little bit more stable. So yeah. It was a nice run while it lasted, but it wasn't without its drawbacks. And that's one of those things that I'd sort of, if anyone's looking at calc as a potential solution, yes, it's very cheap. Yes, it's very easy to maintain, but you've got to be on the ball with it, and you need to make sure you know what you're doing with it, because if you don't, like, you're going to have issues like I did. And it's only going to be to detriment of your tank.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, if I had your size tank, Joss, I wouldn't run calc personally. I mean, I never run it before on my other systems because I didn't feel the need. And like you say, there's lots of information out there where people have completely nuked their tank by having calc accidents. Dumping slurry into the tank, and so I mean, as I say, my hand was slightly forced because financially it made the most sense to me.
You've got a swimming pool, so
so it's just, and I use it in conjunction with a calcium reactor as well. So obviously the calcium reactor drags your pH down. Obviously the calc can help to counteract that. But so are you dosing calc still, Tom, or not?
Like I said to you earlier, I've had to stop because I was what I'm going to refer to as stacking it. So I we're going to talk about this in a minute. Well, I'm going to end up talking about it. I can tell you about ranting about equipment. But yeah, I'd got my pH probe would not take the calibration about 2 weeks ago, and it was ironically the day that I've got everybody coming around for the barbecue and the meat that everybody came to a couple of weeks ago. So I got that annoyed with it. And I'm just, you know, when you've got reefers coming to your house, they're all over your tank, aren't they? They're all going to point out. They're going to point out, oh, that's not right. That's not right. Well, some of my mates are anyway. Point out the negatives over the positives. So when the pH monitor was saying 5 point something, I was like, no, I'm not having that. I'll just turn it off. I can't have that. It's offending my eyes. So I turned it off. So I didn't have to look. So nobody could point out that he was saying 5 point whatever. So I turned it off. Forgot all about it. Now I've always run Calquasser on the reverse light cycle of my tank. I've always found it's better to not have it to run it 24/7. So I'm more about the sort of stability sort of aspect, or a range as I was going about. So I wanted it ideally between 8.2, 8.25, and all the way up to probably 8.4, 8.5. That's my sweet spot. If I keep it in there 24 hours a day, I'm happy. So I run Calquasser on the opposite of my light cycle. So what I mean by that is when the lights go off, things stop photosynthesizing, you know, CO2 it naturally will increase in your tank, pH will therefore drop. So I turn my Calquasser on based on my tank's behavior, which I'm going to go on to say you need to, before you start playing around with any of these different ways of increasing your pH, you need to understand what your pH is. And ironically, well, not ironically, but ideally know what it is for a longer period of time, not just, you know, a day or, you know, a week, because it will change throughout the months. Summer, you'll have the windows and doors open, it'll go up, and winter, you'll have everything locked down, heating on, it'll probably drop. So I think the best thing is to, if you can afford, invest in something where you can measure it and log the data, because I like my data to look back on and when things went right and wrong and what you were doing. And by having that data, you can then tweak, as I call it, your pH, if you want to, that is, based on your tank's behavior. But you're only going to know your tank's behavior by having that data. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I like to measure it, so I know what it is, so I know when it drops, between what times, and therefore I put my thanks to Lee again with the Apex. It's a Kamoa pump. It comes on, holds the dosage that I've already set it to. So that'll come on at say 10 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock at night. I think it's set to, and that will dose X amount of mil. And again, I'll tweak that depending on the uptake of everything in the tank, and that will come off normally around, I think it stops about 8, 9 o'clock in the morning when the lights come on. So I run it reverse light cycle, because I try and bend the curve, as you say, try and get a range. So try and avoid the ups and downs. I found when I dosed it 24/7 in the garage, when I first played around with it a couple of years ago, it was going really, really high. And so it was like 8.2 to sort of like 8.6, 8.7. And I'll just try and keep it, like I say, ideally a more sort of stable range. But going back to what I said a minute ago with stacking it, so what I've done by turning the pH probe off is, because I was getting annoyed with it, I didn't realise that I was dosing more Calquasser than I needed. So basically my pH just kept going up and going up. So I spoke to you about it. When I finally calibrated it, turned it back on, I realised I was at 8.7. And it took nearly 2 weeks to get it back down from not dosing it at all. So kind of contradicting what I'm saying here about having everything recorded, because I turned it off and spat my dummy out. But yeah, I've had success. I'm not saying I've had more success running it on the reverse light cycle than if I ran it 24/7, but I've had success with it, and for me, it works. It works for my system, so that's what I do. So I think the sweet number is the 8.3 mark. Really, I think that's when you really start to see the benefits of the high pH. I don't think you need to be pushing it any higher than 8.5, 8.6 personally. Unless you guys have got any opinions on that, but I think you're going to go. So I know some people can push it a bit higher, but I don't know.
Yeah,
what are the risks? Do we know? What are the risks? Anybody experienced any risks?
I reckon Doug might know some of the associated risks.
Yeah,
if you know some of the risks, go on, chuck them in the comments, and we'll get them on. I'm
sure he will.
Personally, I just don't know what the risks are when you are sort of pushing that sort of level. You were 8.7 and up. I'd imagine they'd probably be fairly similar to any other risk in the tank. Too much is potentially too detrimental. You put too much calcium in, you're going to end up with problems. I'd imagine it's that same area of issue. We realistically want to be targeting natural seawater and similar levels. So it's what a coral is used to. And
that's one issue. That is one issue I've had with. I mean, I use fauna for my ICPs, and to be fair to Doug, he does give me quite a lot of constructive feedback on them. And I've had the issue with the high calcium. I know Liam's had this. Gil's Aquarium, he's had the same issue as well. We got stupidly high calcium levels because of the amount of calcos we were dosing. So, in order for me to get it down, I've switched it off. It's been off for, like I say, 2 weeks now. But the pH is naturally fairly high, so it almost sort of begs the question: do I actually need to be running it in the first place? Possibly not. So, but it's there as a backup if I want to use it. And I think if I'm only using it for a couple of hours a day, if I do reduce it even further, I don't think that's going to have as much of a detrimental effect long term as if I'm running it 24/7. But again, we shall see. So. Anyway,
so you still use your normal ATO then for your top off, even though you're dosing calc at night. You just let your ATO run as normal, or?
Yes. I've got the level 10, so I let the ATO do its normal thing, and I've just turned it off for the time being. The calc stirrer. Right.
Okay. And
I've not seen any issue from not running it for the last couple of weeks. Everything looks happy. I don't know. It's one of those, isn't it? Until you've experienced it, it's like testing, not like how fast you can go in a car, but you're sort of testing, like, where the boundary is and when you get your hand slapped. And I don't want to get my hand slapped, so I think I'll leave it there. It's all I'm sort of saying. Yeah. I don't think if people are saying, the numbers need to be, your ideal numbers like, 825 and above, 83, 84 probably at a max, then why would you start trying to test it? Unless you're happy to dice with,
Yeah, because it's going to put things out of whack, isn't it? I mean, this whole hobby is about trying to keep within, the parameters that don't have to be fixed numbers, but they need to be within a range which is going to give you the best results. And I think pushing your pH, like Josh said, it's going to be the same as pushing everything else. You don't run your calcium at 600, do you? You're going to push things out of whack. And I think there's going to be a point, obviously, where you're just going to see negative effects in your corals if you push your pH to, 8.8, 8.9 maybe. I can't see the point of doing it, to be honest, unless you're specifically targeting, a very small selection of corals, which maybe responds well to it, but you've got to do a lot of experimentation to find that out, I would have thought.
I think
8.3, fine.
Yeah, 8.3. So is that your happy place?
Well, no, my happy place is above 8. I'm not a massive coral freak, am I?
No,
I don't.
Just a freak.
So, above 8. That's it. I'll strike a show. I'm going above 8. I'm happy. It gets 8 to 8.3. Yeah, but if my pH sticks at 8 to 8.2, that's good enough for me. I really don't sweat about it. And the other thing I do is, if you look at Paul's tank at AAC, I mean, I know he's changed now, but he ran that for ages on old school calcium reactor, and his pH was about 7.9. And no one walks into that shop and goes, "Your tank looks a bit rough, Paul." Do they?
Yeah.
It's a stunning tank. Yeah. And as we always say, even if your numbers are not brilliant, if they're stable and those numbers are like that for years, then your corals will respond and they grow. This is the thing I always have about people that run frag farms are completely different from hobbyists. Their outlook and what they do is not what we do. They grow frags. We don't grow frags. We want to grow a frag into a colony, and then we want to maintain a colony. We don't want to maintain 3,000 frags, do we? So a frag has a different growth rate, different coloration, different needs to a big colony, different flow, different light. So they're not the same. It's very easy to light a frag, isn't it? Because it's got like 2 branches. When it grows into a 2-foot colony in a tank, then getting the same amount of light and the same amount of flow that it got as a frag is a whole different ball game. So they're 2 different. So I don't really like to look at what people do. I look at Chris Mecklin, what he does. I'm not going to do it because I'm not running a frag farm. It's not what I'm about. So they're just 2 different things. That's my personal take in it. I know a lot of people.
No.
You know, and they put out great videos, and they're very good. They do cutting edge things, you know, and they're breeding and they're spawning and they're doing all those things. It's great, but most of what they do is not really directly relatable to what we do in our tanks. And we don't constantly change our corals out either, do we? You know, we're not selling them and constantly bringing new ones in. You tend to get a reasonably set amount, and then we sit.
Well, some people might argue they're constantly putting new corals in because corals are dying. But
well, yeah, there is that. Yeah, but you know, in terms of turnover, we're not on a sort of frag farm basis, are we? So
no, fair comment.
I'd say I do agree with some of what you said there, Rob, in that there are definitely some stark differences in how a frag farm is going to be run to a reef tank. You're totally right in that flow, lighting, and a number of other different aspects of it are going to be. I would say water chemistry potentially. Might not agree with you on, just because it's like water chemistry is water chemistry, isn't it? Like it's stability is key as we all
they
go
are trying to grow though, aren't they?
That's it. I think for me at the minute, I'm very much still, because I've not been as on it as I should be. Someone's made that point in the comments actually as well. Because I've still got a lot of sort of frag size corals, I am in what I would refer to as a growth phase. I want things to grow a little bit quicker, and then, like you were saying, then later on down the line, once I've got those bigger colonies, my focus is going to be more on coloration, polyp extension, and things that make the coral look good at the size it's at. So there are points where we can definitely copy what frag farms and the like are doing, but then potentially further down the line, like you were saying about the AAC tank, maybe that tank where it's got big colonies in it, and you know it is an established tank, will have a totally different setup and method of running than what the coral tables would. So you've definitely got a very good point in that there are a lot of aspects where we need to sort of take with a pinch of salt and go, is this method going to be suitable to my tank? That we've said before, tanks are all very different. So you are totally right in that everything, you know, that there are lots of positives to be taken from it, but take everything with a pinch of salt and go, is this going to suit what my current goal is, what my current outlook is? Yes, it's working for one person, but are they trying to achieve the same thing as me? Potentially not. So you do make a very good point with that.
Right, let me jump into some of these comments. So somebody else to join us. John Costello, thanks for joining us this Sunday morning. Right, Doug's giving us a couple of comments here. I've used for 30 years. I would not now since I started working with the Fauna Lab. I support the Fauna for iceberg for US as well. I see the problems our US cousins have with calc. In a profile that maintains along with calcium reactor, serious side effects are only just starting to come out now. Right, okay. Who else have we got?
Who is Doug? Is that Doug? Is he the bonus method? Doug?
Doug Dorrit. Doug Dorrit.
I'm just a bit slow to the party there. I've just realised who he is.
It's all right.
I'm sorry, Doug. I just caught on.
Question here. I don't know who's answered this. Jupiter's Reef asked a minute ago, can you run a CO2 scrubber independently without a skimmer? If so, how would you do it?
You could use an airline with an air stone attached to it. Basically, it's just a way of forcing oxygen-rich air into the system to try and increase that, like you said earlier, Rob, increase that ratio of air in the water. So you could just literally use an air pump. You go with an air stone, a normal air stone, it's up to you. But the drawback of that is you're going to end up with potentially micro bubbles flying around the system. So you could do it at night, like you do with calc scrubbing. Tom, sorry. Bubble scrubbing that a lot of people do, so then you don't see it. But there are risks that bubbles can get trapped in sort of the meteor corals, your LPS corals. I've never had that issue. I've never done it, so I wouldn't know. Can't comment on it. But that is something I've heard, is that if you trap the bubbles in some of the meteor corals, you can end up with some die-off. So there are, again, as with everything, there's always associated risks. So just beware of it, basically.
Good answer. Thanks for that, Josh. Right then. So what else have we got here? Carl Quasser is the best for Carl saying Magpie. Jake Adams from Reef Builders tanks were fantastic. He'd been using Carl Quasser for years. Okay. I think, like I say, most people is probably find something that works, don't they?
Yeah, I like Jake Adams. Was great for just his tanks were so simple.
Let's have a look. What else we got here? Yeah, other comments. What pH do you recommend? I can't say. I think that's my happy place is 8.3 to 8.4. Was what I'm not saying I've seen, life-changing results from running it at that level, but it just seems to sit better. Most sort of everything seems to be happier at that sort of level. I think you've got to be careful though. Is it what you're happy with, or is it what your tank's happy with? It's hard to know because you can't just tap on the glass and ask it as such. Can you? Are you happy with that? Is it all right for you? Too warm, too salty? So it's difficult. You've got, and again with certain corals, it can take some corals, livestock, it can take hours, and some it can take days, months, whatever before you can see the side effects. And the question is, do you know whether it was that caused that side effect or not? Some of it will never know. And some of it's just coming out now, like we talked about with Calc, maybe. I think I would recommend a pH that you can monitor, is what I would say. That it is what it is, because I think that for me is paramount to any of these pH conversations, and that is having some equipment where you can measure it accurately and consistently. Especially if you're going to start dosing or trying to chase numbers or tweak with things, you need to have. Would you two not agree? You need to have some sort of reference guide to know what you're dealing with.
You need to know accurately what your numbers are. It's all well and good having a probe set there. If the probe's not been calibrated for 6 months, it could be massively out, and you're looking and saying, "Oh, well, I've got 8.4." You calibrate it, and in fact, you're at 8.1. Yeah. It's frustrating. Yeah. You've got to keep calibrating these things. It'd be nice to just have something that you could put in the tank and go, right, measure it for me, and it's good to go. But it's equipment. It's always going to drip. Yeah. So I'd say knowing that what you're using is very accurate is probably massively essential. But yeah, like you're saying, it's good to have something that you can keep a regular eye on it, but it does need to be accurate, and you need to maintain that to make sure it is.
I don't know why, but I always calibrate my pH probe at 4 and 7 rather than 7 and 10.
All right, okay.
What are you using, Rob? Are you using the Neptune?
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, my probe's been really good. Like it's the original probe. I've had it actually, no, it's not the original probe. I've changed it once, I think. But every time I test it, it's, it's not drifted hardly at all, really. So
I think if you're calibrating, it should be fine, shouldn't it? At the end of the day, if it's picking up an exact reference point, you should be fine. I know, I'm sure that David Bensley was in the comments. I think he was calibrating his with the 4 and 7, but it was recommended by Neptune to go with I think it's 7 and 10, is it? Just because he's running the higher ranges, so he was like, well, you need to be calibrating inside that range. But for me, I think if you've calibrated something and it's picking up an accurate result, then surely it's going to do it across the scale. You'd like to think anyway.
Yeah, I did have a reason. I can't remember what it was now, because there was a specific reason I chose 4 and 7. I remember I probably read a paper somewhere on it. That's what normally happens, but it's gone out of my head now. But yeah, I don't think I've used the 10 for a long time, but I guess my head is I'm never going to be at 10 anyway. Hopefully I'll never be at 4, to be honest. But
well, I think it was time for a poll. I've just chucked a poll in asking people, do you currently measure pH on your aquarium? So do people actually look at it? So I think we'll start with that one and see where we go this morning.
Right.
What's Josh putting here? Josh Hill. Morning, Josh. Thanks for joining us. RZ pH Plus was the absolute worst thing I ever used for over a year. pH effect dropped off. Chasers were totally unstable, and dosing regularly didn't keep them up during monthly RCP.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a classic example, isn't it, of someone using a product and saying it was absolutely rubbish. And then, I mean, I'm pretty sure Paul runs his tank on the element stuff now in AAC.
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's weird, isn't it? You talk to two people, one to say it's absolutely rubbish. Someone else
we
say,
know what's in
it.
That Salinity pH Plus.
Yeah, it's sodium hydroxide.
Is it?
Well, part of it is, yeah.
Switched over to Bose back in February. I get better pH, 8.1 to 8.5, dosing bicarb, get chase stability. All of a sudden, huge improvements across the corals. I think it's like anything, innit? Look at your tank. Listen to what you want. Yeah. We say listen. Yeah. Look at what your tank's telling you. Definitely
change one thing at a time and let it happen for a little while as well.
Yeah.
I've been quite guilty of changing two or three things, and if it's had a positive effect, you don't know which one it is, and on the flip side of that, if it's had a negative effect, again, you still don't know what of the changes you've made are the negatives. So it's again patience. We're all impatient, let's be honest, but if you can try your best to be patient, you might get better results than the rest of us.
So you two then, pH, or you've stopped calc now, Josh, sorry, so you're not doing calc in the minute. So when you were doing it, were you dosing it 24/7?
I was doing 2/3 and 1/3. So I would do 2/3. So when it was on the ATO, it was just as the ATO kicked in. And the pH results were better then than when I was doing it on the doser. But when I had it on the doser, whatever. So basically, I think I was up to, it was 1.6 liters a day was my max evaporation. So that's the maximum I could dose with it. Without doing. So I'm going to sidetrack just a little bit. So what's he called? It's the Australian guy, as a YouTube channel, Parker's Reef. So he doses more than his evaporate, but he does that by having an auto water chain set up whereby he doses higher salinity water into the tank with the water chains when he takes out. So he's obviously got the fresh water going in from the calc, but then he's got the high salinity, so it counteracts itself. It's a clever way of doing it, but very risky unless you've got it absolutely nailed on with calibration. That's a sidetrack. So when I was using the doser, I was dosing, I think it was a third volume across the photo period and then 2/3 when the lights were out, just to try and stop that low, because we know 7.8 is sort of like that borderline of dangerous. So if you can keep yourself away from it, then it could have, if I dosed it all equally across it, would it have just meant that I had the same swings, but just it just shifts the whole scale up a little bit? I don't know. It wasn't really something that I have to be honest, I paid that much attention to. It was just your lows at night, so dose the majority at night, and most people said to dose at night, so that's the route I went with it.
Rob, do you do 24/7? You dosing?
Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah, I dose 24/7, and I dose, like I said, to 100% of my evaporation. So I haven't had my ATO on for probably 2 years. Wow. But all my fresh water goes through my calc stirrer and then into the tank. It just drips in 24/7. I just keep an eye on my salinity. I adjust it obviously seasonally, because
I was going to say
evaporation's higher in the summer than the winter. So and I go from, like, I think I'm doing 23, 24 liters a day at the moment because it's summer, and it might drop down to 18 or something in the winter.
What was your pH before you did it then? Did you, or do you not know? Did you set it up straight on the tank, or?
No, because when I started, obviously I didn't have hardly any livestock in the tank, and it was fine. It was bumping along, and then, like I said, it started to get low at night, like to 7.8, and I was just like,
oh really? Wow.
Yeah. It was just a bit too low. So I just thought, and I had a chat with Paul and AAC, and he was just saying, old school calc reactor and calc stirrer, but just for that size system are probably the cheapest route to take. And so so I've run the calcium reactor and the calc stirrer. I mean, the calcium reactor it's on anywhere between 3 and 6 hours a day. And then I do the calcs 24/7, and then I just drip in that sodium hydroxide as a little top up. And that's it really. I mean, it's pretty simple.
Right then, I'm going to stop this poll. So 73% of people test their pH.
Yeah, that's actually lower than I thought.
Monitor it. Is it?
They monitor it. Oh, you mean
73% of the people who voted have gone for, they currently do measure pH. So it's something that they look at in their tank. So they're aware of it. So that's higher than I thought, actually, in a good way.
Yeah.
Gaz's Reef said you didn't read his question properly as well.
Gaz's Reef, read my question again. Right.
Yeah. He said, what pH monitor do you recommend? I think is that the question he was, if that is the one.
Oh, right. Sorry, what pH? Oh, God. Well, I'm all about redundancy. I would never just go with one, personally. That sounds, people are like, what? Buy two? No, I've 2 ways of measuring it, is all I would say. I just think technology, and this again is just from personal experience, I just think we are so, or the majority of us, me personally, are so and Lee's going to wince when I say this, I think we're too easily excited over technology, and we fall into this, well, if you're telling me it's that, then it is that. And I try and steer away from technology telling me what everything is all the time. I use it as just as a reference guide. So the point I'm trying to make in a roundabout fashion is I like to have more than one way of measuring something so that I know it's like getting a second opinion. That's how I look at it on something. I know that if something isn't quite right, then I've got a second opinion. So to answer your question, I've got the Apex. Well, at the minute, I've got the Reef Factory pH probe, which I use, or the upgraded one with the glass pH probe, and I've got the Hannah pH pen, which has been great. I've had this for a couple of years. I always use this as a backup, and I'm hopefully today, when Lee comes around and helps me, going to have the pH probe on the Apex, which is just because it comes with the Apex sort of thing. It's part of it. But there's not one that I would say you'd go out and buy. I mean, we were talking about this earlier, and Rob, back in the day when you used to work, which I know was a long time ago, you used part of your research was you were testing. Salinity, so you were talking about?
Yeah, I tested brackish water. Obviously, that confluence between fresh and sea in estuaries. I actually worked in salt marsh. And the Salinity probe I used back then was one probe, and it was £2,000. And every single time I used it, I had to calibrate it. So that's the sort of what you should be doing, really. So, I mean, to be honest, the Salinity probes in this hobby, I don't really think they're worth having, if I'm honest.
Oh, okay.
I mean, to be fair, Apex don't even sell them now, do they? You buy a new Apex, you don't get a Salinity probe. So they've dropped it.
I didn't know that.
Final recognition from them that they're no good long term.
Wow, that's interesting.
But yeah, you got to pay a lot of money to get a good conductivity probe. But yeah, so pH, I use the Apex. Like I said, I've probably changed it once in I don't know how long I've been running. 7 years, 8 years I've been running that Apex. But I manually test everything as well, like old school Salinity or Red Sea or whatever test kit I use, whatever the ones my eyes can look at. And I do that for all of my elements at least once a week, to be honest. So even if I've got a Trident, I still do the calcium and magnesium and alkalinity.
Yeah. That's kind of what I was. That's kind of what I'm trying. What I was saying.
Reason, it's not that I don't trust it. It's just that I think it's very easy to just get lazy when you have things telling you.
That's what I've done, and that's what I was trying to get at. I should fall into this sort of, well, everything's all right because I'm on my mobile phone or whatever, and everything looks pretty and everything's great.
And it's even easier if you do that for months and months and months and months on end, and every single time you do your hands-on manual test. And it agrees with what your Trident's telling you, for example, your GHL or your Hydros or whatever you're using. And I think it's really easy. If you do it for months, you just eventually just go, I'll skip it this week because I'm busy. And then before you know it, it's a month. And then at some point, they're going to drift off. So I just think it's like anything else. You've got to make it a regular, even though it's boring, you just have to make it a regular routine. Just because it just keeps you on track. This hobby's about staying on the rails, isn't it? And there's so many things which can take you off the rails, life issues, whatever. And I think those people with long-term healthy, good tanks, they just do boring things day in, day out as part of their maintenance. That they don't even.
You've got to be stern with yourself, though, haven't you? I mean, it's like, when was the last time people cleaned the return pump out? Yeah, you clean a power head because it's quite easy to get to. But clean the impeller on your return pump, or your impeller on your skimmer, or and you've got to. I find it hard because cleaning my return pumps is a right ball ache. It takes at least an hour.
I just turn mine up to full speed and just let it clean itself off a little bit and turn it back down again.
But now the pH probes, the Reef Factory one. So I'm going to try and answer his question. I would definitely go. I'd probably suggest the Apex route, but I would, if you could afford to have a secondary method of measurement, whether it's a manual test or a pen or something, I would definitely recommend having a
Milwaukee probes are quite good, aren't they? You can buy them like a standalone little unit. I know they're quite popular in the States. What have I used?
Well, there's one that there's
stuff, but
yeah, I'm sure there's one that Chris Mecklin changed his Apex probes to. It's a Milwaukee one or a different brand for the simple fact it's a lot more accurate and it lasted longer. But you have to trick your Apex to think that it's actually got the Apex one. I'm sure I watched a video on that a while ago. Anyway,
sounds likely. Yeah,
but no, test calibration. It's a swear word to me. Calibration. It really is. But yeah, it's part of the hobby, unfortunately, and you have to accept that they have to be calibrated. Yeah,
I've been running the GHL one since the inception of this tank, and like you, Rob, the probe's now well over a year old, and it's still going fine. Occasionally, it does need a good switch up in the water to get any sort of solids off of it. And when we're talking about calibration, I think the easiest way to tell if your probe is off is to get one of your solutions, put the probe in it, and if it measures what the solution is, you know you're in range. But if you put it in a pH of 10, let's say, and it comes up with 9.5, you know your calibration's off, so it's time to calibrate again. So it's very easy to check it. Then if it is off, then yes, you need to calibrate it. Sometimes it's off far too often, and like you're saying, Rob, it gets quite Tom, it gets quite frustrating. But yeah, it's easy enough to check, but when you have to start doing it quite regularly, it can be, even though it is only a couple of minute task, it's just one of those extra ones you think, oh, do I have to go and do that again? And it's very easy to put it off, and then you end up falling into that, well, am I measuring things accurately? So yes, you can have multiple ways of measuring it, but if you have only got one and you've got your calibration solution, check your calibration. If your calibration's on point, then realistically, you could probably trust the result you're getting, but there's no harm in obviously having a second way of testing it.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a couple of seconds, doesn't it, to drop it in the solution. You don't actually have to calibrate it, do you, if it's reading correctly. So if you drop it in a 7 solution and it reads 7, you go, yeah, that's it, good, done. Yeah, it's literally seconds, So stop moaning, Tom.
We just burned him there. I've
said this, and I'll bore everybody. Apologies, but I just think you spend all this money and all this technology. And like you're saying, Rob, to be fair, with that probe that you used years ago, back in 1910 or whatever it was 2,000 quid. It was 2,000 quid. You know, I mean, I was saying earlier, the pH probe that I used to use on my old Delta calcium reactor, they were off eBay. And I think they were like 7, 8, 10 quid. And I used to just literally, rather than calibrate them, I used to just throw them away every 3 months and put a new one on, because it was just cheaper, and I knew that they were, fairly accurate back then. But it just annoys me that all this technology these days, and you have to calibrate stuff, and the calibration is so important to get it right, because if you don't, if you contaminate any of your calibration fluid, for example, which if you're all fingers and thumbs like me, sometimes it's quite easy to do. You can obviously be setting it at the wrong level, as I'm saying. So it's an important thing to do, but you need to pay attention when you're doing it, is what I would also say, so you're doing it properly. A bit like testing your water, Yeah. Anyway, so are we going to talk about? Should we talk about any negatives then, Pete, about pH, or what do we think? What do we think is a low pH? What do you think people should avoid? Anybody? Any comments?
7.8.
Why do we think that then? I'm just going to do a poll while you're doing that.
If you look at scientific papers, if you look at anything that's been put out there from people that are far more developed in their understanding than we are, that's generally the accepted number, whereby things start to become detrimental. If you look at ocean acidification, I think it's when the pH of reefs is dropping below 7.8, and that's where we're starting to have yes, we've got the temperature issues, but when you raise the temperature, you lower the pH. So it goes hand in hand. Yes, the water's getting warmer, but it does drive that pH down. And I think 7.8 is that tipping point whereby we start to see bleaching and die off of corals. So if you're wanting to find a low point and go, well, I want to avoid that, 7.8 is the absolute bottom end of what you should be avoiding. But if you want to have that safe buffer, and we talk about ranges all the time, if you want to have that safe buffer, I would say keeping it above 8 is probably a sensible route to go down. I think my low at the minute, last night was 7.97. So I'm just scraping below the 8, and ideally I'd like to have it above 8, just for peace of mind. But yeah, I would say 7.8 is your absolute bottom end. I don't know if you think any different, Rob.
No, I think you're right. I think 7.8 would be mine. Yeah, mine did get 7.8, and that's when I decided I need to do something really. Yeah.
Anything with a 7.
Yeah, really. I mean, I suppose ideally most people like to be minimum of 8. I think most people are happy if it drops. If 8's your low, 8.3 is your high, you're good all day long, really, aren't you? But, I mean, if you look at someone like Sanjay's tank, Sanjay Jossi, his tank, I'm pretty sure goes to 7.9 on a regular basis. Because he's not a massive fan of pH and chasing it at all, is he?
No.
And his tank looks absolutely stunning. It's rammed with huge colonies and whatever. But I think it's that classic thing again that because he's always gone 7.9 at night for 15 years or whatever that tank's been up, those corals just adapted to it. So yeah, I think most people would agree that 8 to 8.3 is going to be a decent range. 7.8, you need to take a look at what's going on in the tank, really.
Well, 75%. I've just chucked a poll up quickly while you two were talking about that, and 75% of people are saying that they aim for between 8 and 8.2 as their standard pH on their tank. That's what people aim for.
I would look for a higher high personally. You're comfortable in 8 to 8.2. If I'm honestly looking for the optimum range, I would want 8.2 to 8.4. I'm one of those people that doesn't like the volume on the radio to be an odd number, so I wouldn't ever say 8.3 as my optimum, just because it messes.
Do you
with
do that? Do you do that?
Yeah.
I've done that. To be fair, it has to be an even number on the TV.
Change the volume over at work, and I'll start twitching if they've not put on an even number, and I'd make them change it. But no. 8.2 to 8.4 for me. It's a slightly higher range, so it's not detrimental.
Brilliant.
It sounds and looks better for me. So yeah, that's where I go.
Yeah, I think this goes back to the original thing is, if your tank runs at 8.2 and you're putting in minimal effort to reach it, you got to ask yourself, is it worth putting a load of effort in to bump it to 8.3? That would be
you're already at a good number, aren't you? So
yeah, I think, if you could, if it's a simple thing as maybe running an airline outside and getting it to 8.3, fair enough if it's easy to do. But, I think in modern day houses, 8.2 is still a reasonably good number for a reef tank. If you've got kids and pets and, CO2 levels in your house.
Well, we're going to go back to that in a second, because I think there's other things we probably need to talk about pH, other methods and things that can affect it before we wrap up. So got a couple of people to say hello to, in the comments. I'm assuming this is Lee Snow, maybe abbreviation. If it is Lee, thanks for joining us. If you've been on, if not, 133 SNO. Switch to the new Red Sea 4-part. The KH has a pH buffer in it. Didn't know that. We've also got Gareth. Morning, mate. Sorry I'm late to the party. Been forced to do some cleaning by the missus.
You've got some grass to cut.
Yeah, he is. He's always busy cutting his grass. And Rob, you've got a shout out here. Where's your RAF t-shirt? Why aren't you wearing it?
Because he's got swear words all over it, Ron.
I know which. Right, okay. Yes. Yeah. Is that the gentleman that you got the corals from? That's on one of your YouTube videos. Right, okay. I tried looking on his website the other day. Wouldn't load up on my phone.
Yeah, I didn't realise he hasn't loaded the shop side of it yet. Because I went to do the same, and I went.
Right.
So he hasn't finished it yet. But
who is it? Sorry, Rob. Is it? Is it another Rob? Is it his name? Ron. Sorry. Morning, Ron. Thanks for joining us, bud. Hope you're well. I went on, tried to go on his website to look at what he'd got, and I couldn't get on. Anyway, hopefully he updates it soon so I can have a look.
Well, he's seen that now, so he can up his game.
He's seen that now, hopefully, yes. Are the corals doing well that you got from him? They look decent sizes that he'd sent you.
Yeah, they're lovely. Yeah. Great corals. Yeah, really nice. He's got some lovely stuff.
One.
Yeah, it's good.
All right, okay. Early days. Shout out. Eden Corals. Yes, all the best, mate. Hope it works out well for you. Yeah. I do prefer buying corals from other reefers.
He's closer to you, Tom, as well, because he's in Scotland. You're halfway there, mate.
Closer to this lad, closer to Josh than me.
Yeah, Sunderland. Yeah,
only a stone's throw.
Yeah. So other methods. So I think we just need to recap. So we've all played around with Calclasser. Yeah. ATOs, dosing lines, stirrers for me and you, Rob. To be fair, Alex, who's not on, he's probably still in bed at this time. Alex Brooks, who comes on Friday night, he's made a stirrer with an actual stirrer, a magnetic stirrer. Yeah, magnetic pill. He's got a small tank as well, so he's made his own stirrer that way. He says it's been working great for him as well. So there are other ways of.
Has he put a piece of glass in the bottom of it? Do we know?
Don't know.
That was one thing that Devon, Reef Dudes Devon said about was if you do the pill on something plastic, because of obviously how abrasive the powder is, you're going to end up wearing away that, and you're going to end up with microplastics in the system.
I think it's in a glass beaker with a cup with
glass, and it's not so bad.
Yeah. With like a lid on it, and he's using that through a dosing pump. So yeah,
nice.
He said, "Can I borrow one of those? I'm sure you've done it with other reefers. Can I borrow this and see if it works?" And then, like when you're next on ever borrows lawnmower and then never fetches it back, sort of thing. Yeah. So he was like, "How much was that stirrer?" I was like, £30. Why? Farmers was like, "Well, I need to give 30 quid because it's working great. I'm keeping it." I was like, "Oh, yeah, thanks, mate." So I was going to mix something the other day. So I normally mix potassium chloride in it. When I'm dipping stuff, I always just put it on for 5 minutes. Where is it? Oh yeah, he's got it. Anyway, we digress. So we've played around with Calclasser. We talked about airlines, and we've talked about
CO2 scrubbers.
CO2 scrubbers. Thank you. What other products, methods are out there for increasing it that we know of? Anything that we've missed? Do we think?
Well, Rob, you mentioned Refugiums, didn't you?
Refugium.
They are. That they're good. That they do work. They do have their drawbacks that you said about the build up of sort of nasties in the bottom of it, breeding grounds for if you've got Aptasia in your tank, then Aptasia. You get your bristleworms and things in there, which is not necessarily a bad thing because they'll eat some of the detritus. But they have their own associated risks. If it decides to dissolve and just turn into a mush, it can end up putting all the nutrients back into the water again. So there are risks with that. There was and someone might want to correct me on this, but when I was, because obviously, like I've said, I've got lots of plants around the flat. At night, as far as I'm aware, they actually put CO2 out rather than So if you've got, unless you're lighting that refugium 24/7, I'm going to imagine you're probably going to have a similar issue. If you've got it on a reverse light cycle, it's going to suppress your daily high. It's going to boost your nighttime low, but it might suppress your daily high. So that there could be a drawback to that side of it.
Well, the issues I've had with Refugium was them ripping out a lot of iron out the system, and a lot of die-off as well. I had a lot of die-off because obviously, I think what people forget about with the Refugium is it's only as effective or active, should I say, to the surface area of the area that you've got the Refugium. So there's no point. That's why a lot of people tumble it. They'll tumble the cheat out like a doner kebab, as daft as it sounds, so that it's literally getting light all the way around. Just like a doner kebab, nothing wrong with that. Just a good analogy. I had more negatives with the Refugium than positives, so that's something I stopped a while ago and went on the Calclasser train. But no, the Refugium's a good one. And you can get an external. You can get an external reactor as well, can't you? So if you're struggling for space and you want to do something, and you might not want to spend the money on, or you might not want to use Calclasser or anything else, you can pick one up second-hand these days for not a lot of money. One of the algae reactors, can't you? And it's good for nutrient control.
Well, I think most people
do the same thing.
Most people run Refugiums for removal of nitrates, really, don't they?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, nutrient control rather than pH. Yeah.
It's just an added bonus, isn't it?
Yeah,
added bonus.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think the biggest kind of fundamental thing you can do for pH in your tank is just air circulation in the room the tank's in.
Well,
it's that.
There we go.
Yeah.
Here we go. On that note, positive input, ventilation.
8.4. I mean, that's massive.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, it is because fresh air has got such a low CO2 concentration, and your tank's trying to equilibrate with the atmospheric air around it. It's just that and lots of surface agitation on your water, on your tank. You don't want any stale areas, do you? You know,
another option is, like Dave's saying, you can get divorced. Less people cohabiting in the house.
Sit like a loner with just you and your tank, and then just perv over your pH going up.
Oh dear. I can't think of anything else that's as positive other than what we've talked about so far in terms of increasing it. Ventilation, airline into skimmer, CO2 scrubber, Calquasser, some other products, the pH plus that, well, somebody say it doesn't work or that it wasn't very good. Somebody mentioned obviously a minute ago the Red Sea, they've got something with it. Grumpy's saying house plants. But we're saying there might be a downside of that. We're saying, it'll absorb it during the day, but then exhaust it.
But during the day, photosynthesis takes in carbon dioxide, breaks it down to glucose, gives off oxygen, and at night they just respire like we do. So they give off CO2 through respiration. So it's just, it's simple photosynthesis really. But
it was one thing I was debating doing. It's something I've wanted to do since the inception of the tank, but because I've not got the sump space for it. Was having a reverse light cycle frag section.
How
much of a benefit that would have, but in theory, I've got a 12-hour photo period. So if that then came on reverse, and I had a significant enough amount of, because you have a couple of tiny frags in there, it's not going to make any difference. But if you have a significant number of frags in there, then there's no reason why that wouldn't really stabilize the pH a little bit for you.
It's exactly the same. They're going to be photosynthesizing, so they're going to be pulling out CO2 and releasing the O2.
It was what I don't know if any of you saw this. It was a guy, I can't remember what he was called. He was on YouTube. He set up a pretty substantial sized display tank, but he had a display refugium as well, and he had lots of sort of different macroalgae in there that looked good. And he ran that as sort of a secondary, like a macroalgae tank, which he had on the reverse light cycle. So that he had the benefit of obviously the increased pH, but then he also had the nutrient reduction, and it was a place for him to store fish if he had any fish issues. He could put corals in there if he wanted to. And in general, because he kept it as a mini display, he kept it quite clean and tidy. So he didn't have very much settling out in there because he had obviously wave makers and stuff keeping sediment up in the air. So up in the water column. And that was something I debated doing. I thought if you've got something that you want to take care of and actually look at and make it look nice, it might be of benefit. But again, if it starts to die off, you're posing those potential risks that you would if you had a similar.
Did you have that on a reverse light cycle though?
Yeah, I believe so. Right. Yeah.
So that's, I mean, I guess the difficulties of spending time in front of the tank is most of the time going to be asleep, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was in the cabinet then.
Yeah, so it was in the sump, but he had he didn't have he wouldn't have the front on the sump, so he obviously like organised the cabinet so everything looked quite aesthetically nice. And then the front section of that sump was a display refugium. I don't know, like for me, I run my lights 12 till 12, so the reality is I'm going to be in front of the tank when the lights are on. But I know some people might run them from 8 till 8, so if your lights are off by 8 o'clock in the evening, you would have that to look at. So but it's just there. It's one of those. It's personal preference, I think, on that one.
Yeah, it's an alternative way of doing it. It's good.
Any other methods?
I'm trying to think now. There are any that.
I know what I did look at, which I don't think I've seen anyone use, is actually purifying air, so increasing the actual amount of oxygen, because it's like 21%.
All right.
And you can buy units, can't you, which increase the amount of oxygen in the air. And I did wonder if I put that through an airline in the skimmer, whether that would. And then I was like, it's going to be more harmful than good. I was
having a look at that, sort of something similar, Rob, in that I thought if you drive oxygen into the water, like actual oxygen into the water, is it going to just constantly increase it? I think there is you might know better than me on this one. think there is a final saturation level whereby you can't get any more into the water, and you would just be wasting the oxygen. I think you can get like the O2 probes, can't you? I think they're a bit of a nightmare to calibrate and set up, which you'd obviously hate, Tom. But I think you
Tom's out already.
Yeah, exactly.
Hate's a strong word, mate. But yeah, don't lie.
Yeah, I think you can reach max saturation with it, and then it won't increase the pH any further. And that's when you've got other substances obviously need to come into it. So where you're talking about sort of your hydroxides and things that will physically bind up and remove some of the other elements in the water. But yeah, I think there is a point where oxygen, you can drive it in, but I think there is a point. I'm sure you can get. I'm sure it's O2 probes you can get. I know GHL I think do one. Something I did look at as well. So I think there will be a benefit.
I don't know anyone who's the fact that when I looked, no one had done it. I was like, there's probably a good reason for that. And then I didn't really. I'll tell you who has got one of those units. I'm pretty sure I've seen it. Is Mr. Polo Reefing in that massive tank.
That would make sense.
I'm sure he does something with that, but I'm not. I wonder. Oh, I'll tell you. I bet. Oh yeah. So I'm getting so old. I think I've just remembered. What I was thinking of doing was using it with ozone. That's what I was thinking. Yeah. It wasn't putting it straight in the tank. I was going to run it through the ozone generator because I think that would work. It would increase the ozone probably a lot. So that's what I was thinking. Yeah. That's a whole different issue. Gone off.
There's one thing we've not touched on that. Well, I think we did mention it very, very briefly at the start. One thing that will suppress your pH is like vodka dosing and carbon dosing, and trying to focus the tank around bacteria. Because again, like we were saying about plants respiring, Rob, bacteria do the same. So if you're bacteria dosing a tank and your focus is around increasing the bacterial diversity, let's say, or we're trying to drop our nitrates and phosphates through bacteria dosing or carbon dosing to enhance the numbers of bacteria, you're going to suppress your pH to an extent. I did see a couple of people that said if you have a massive amount of biomedia in your sump, you can end up with a suppressed pH. So I sort of run the bare minimum. Yeah, I don't know how accurate that is. I would assume that the volume of bacteria is suitable for the tank and what's required of it. And then obviously we know it proliferates quite quickly. So if you end up with a bacterial bloom, I know if you look at your pH, when you have a bacterial bloom, you'll have a drop in pH. And likewise, if you have loads of media with lots of bacteria hosting it, you could end up with a suppressed pH, which is something that I know I never considered until eventually I'd seen it somewhere. I thought, oh, it's not something that really occurred to me. I think bacteria is a good thing, but maybe too much of something is too much of a good thing.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think because it is when your bacteria does, and it is the aerobic bacteria you're feeding, isn't it? So that would make sense. Yeah, so I guess it's the opposite. So if you run a sulfur reactor, which is anaerobic, it wouldn't touch your pH, would it? Yeah, I can see that.
There's a big thing with bacteria, isn't it?
There is.
Sorry?
I've just put a poll on, and I've just put how important is pH to you in your tank? Not really fussed. Fairly important. Really important. It's life or death. Ring 999. So let that run for a couple more minutes and see what the consensus is on that one. Couple of comments here regarding what we're talking about. Let's just jump back in here a second. Liam saying, I'm assuming this is the frag tank that you mentioned, Josh, in the sump. Liam's putting, tried it, works, but can't do much maintenance as they're always in night mode during the day. I think he's talking about frags, is he?
Well, when you say you can't do much maintenance, do you find there's a negative with fragging, let's say, during the night?
I don't know what he means. Liam, comment below. I will read it out. Timothy, I've got 2 tanks on one system. Tried running the lights, staggered, didn't see any difference.
Or staggered, are we talking, Tim? Are we talking fully reversed or are we talking 6 hours?
Yeah, come on, Tim. If you're going to make a statement, give us some data.
Let's have some numbers.
Let's have some numbers. Gazza's Reef saying, I got a fuge to start pod population. I'm still waiting after 18 months. Added loads, but can't see anything in my fuge. My dad, on the other hand, has got thousands. I think that's one thing I will say about the Refugium now. Not that I'm saying they're all bad. I will say it's a good way of getting your critter population up, that's for sure. They just appear from nowhere. Well, not maybe in Gazza's Gaz's tank. Sorry, mate. Hope you get there soon.
You are adding the right pods, Gaz, aren't you? Not the ones you feed to your fish because they don't live.
Yeah.
There's
That's a good point, actually.
They buy those out of the fridge thinking they're going to seed their tank with pods, and they don't live in the tank.
No, they don't. Good point, that, Rob, actually. Tanks behind you look incredible. Yeah, Rob's looks really nice. Mine's
amazing. Yeah. I mean, that's ozone. That's how clear that water is.
Oh, dear. Let's have a look now. Liam saying, pulsing xenia fuels would work really well as they're one of the most photosynthetic corals we have available due to the pulsing, but runs the risk of them escaping to the display. I thought people used to use... I thought people used to use those for phosphate reduction. Did they? Or did they not? I'm sure they used to use a pulsing xenia sumps.
I mean, that's a bold statement because how does he know? How does he know they're the most photosynthetic coral?
Is that another go on? What's the word? Anthropogenic statement?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's just a statement. That's what I would call an unqualified statement because.
Oh dear. I can just picture Liam's face right now. I'm sure you're going to get a response to that in a second.
Yeah, I mean, if he's got something to say, it is. Yeah, but I mean, even just by the colour of them, I go probably not. Because it would be a nice deep. I mean, there's a reason plants are green. There's a reason most corals are green.
Right, Rob, over to you. A couple of people, pods. I did hear that what you've said a minute ago with the types of pods you use. Gareth asking the same question. Which pods do they need?
You need to go online and go to, is it like Reef Phyto or Mangroves and More, and look at the pods that they sell on there because they're different from the ones you get in the fridge at your local LFS. I can't remember the names. I mean, ticker pods are one of them, but there's all different species. So if you go on those sites.
Because you can't get you call them the tiger pods. You can't get the ones from, Coral Nutrition, can you? You can only get everything. You can't get the live ones in this country because they don't bring them in.
No, which that's the Algae do in the States and whatever. Yeah, but Reef Phyto does them, and Mangroves and More. I'm pretty sure they do some, and they will tell you which ones you can. The ones you can cultivate and breed are the ones you want to buy to put in your tank.
Right, I am sharing now. Which ones we talking, Rob?
Hygriopus californicus, is that the one? That'd be tiger pods, wouldn't
it? Where are we? I'd imagine so.
They haven't seem to have one. No, that's the one there. That's what I've just looked at there.
Yeah, is that it? Yeah. Yeah, I mean you can see by the size of the pods, they're nothing like the ones you normally buy in the little pouches.
Yeah. Definitely have a look on Reef Phyto. Right.
Yeah.
Back to my poll. Right, I'm going to end this poll and then we're going to go to the comments. So, how important is pH to you in your reef tank? 15% of people are saying not really fussed. 31% of people are saying it's fairly important. And then we've got 46 people. So the majority are going with it's really important, which is good. Since we chose this topic to discuss this morning. And 8% of people are saying it's life or death, ring 999. So thanks for voting.
That's you, Tom. That's you. That was your vote, wasn't it?
Yeah. Do you know what? I didn't vote. I didn't influence that one. But no. Right, back to the comments. Tim, here's your answer, Josh. Tim said 22 hours over main tanks.
What's that mean?
Have a look. He's on about he ran different lighting cycles, photo periods.
So spread over 2 days.
Yeah.
22 hours. Right. It's quite a long time.
Liam's coming back with if people come round to view corals feeding fish. Oh, it's talking about how he affected having it in the sump, Josh.
I see what you
mean. What we got here from Ron. Ron's saying corals cell regulate quantity of zooxanthellae. It's so important to say which corals photosynthesize the most.
He's also questioning the Xenia.
Oh, right, okay. Oh. So Liam's come back with his personal philosophy on it is energy used by the Xenia whilst it's pulsing, if using so much more CO2 to convert into the energy aforesaid pulsing compared to Zoa frog spawn that doesn't do anything. I kind of get what he's saying.
Yeah, interesting point. Yeah,
interesting point.
It is
interesting point.
Hmm.
Right, I'm going to wrap this up in 10 minutes. So we've got 10 minutes. So how are we going to conclude over the next 10 minutes, gents, regarding pH? Do we think it is king?
No.
Or not? No. So it's not. So there we go.
Well, I'm not a fan of picking just one element of reefing and saying it's more important than because the thing about reefing is it's the amalgamation of everything.
Good answer.
I know there's a hierarchy.
Such a dad answer, that, isn't it? Such a generic dad answer.
So
everybody's important.
Yeah, well, that's why we like reefs.
It's fair point.
It's an ecosystem, isn't it?
Yeah.
If I could just pick out one element and go, if I nail that, I'm good, then it'll be a lot simpler than it is. So I think it is important, but I mean, personally, it's no more important than nailing my salinity correctly or, all the major elements. But it is important. So not a politician.
I agree with you, Rob.
I think it's fair to say if you're not measuring it and you want success with your tank, you should be.
Yeah.
I think that's what I'd say on it.
It's one of those things, isn't it? It's one of those things that needs to be kept in check and needs to be, if you, like you're saying, if you want success, you're not just going to check calcium and ignore your alkalinity. You're going to check everything. So pH is something that you should also be checking as well. We talk about ranges. pH has a good range. You can't just go, oh, well, pH is what it is, but I'm going to make sure my alkalinity, my calcium, my magnesium, things like that are all bang on, and then ignore pH. It's got as much of a role to play as the other elements in the water. So you need to pay attention to it if you want really good success.
Yeah, I think for me, my bit of advice there is sometimes you don't necessarily need to go out and change. You don't need to implement a method to your tank if your tank doesn't need that method. But the only way you're going to know if it needs it or not is by understanding it, which goes back to what I said about measuring it in the first place. So you know whether or not you do need to do anything. Because if you've got good airflow, you've got good ventilation and all these other, contributing factors, you don't necessarily need to go and dose calc or whatever else you think you might want to do. You might want to do it, but your tank might not need it, is what I'm saying. So until you know that, you don't know which sort of route to go down. He had to come on at some point. I've got to say hello to him. Morning or afternoon almost, my drippy reef geek friend. Morning PH bandits. Hope it's been a good stream. I'll catch up on it later. Has Tom put anybody to sleep with my captivating Rotherham accent? Well, thanks, mate. Love you too. Ron said he agrees with you, Rob. Raising my pH from just under 8 to 8.4 has changed nothing for my corals or growth, but husbandry across the board is what matters, including stability.
Yeah, so it's interesting.
Stability is king. Stability is king. That's what everybody's saying. Yeah. Stability.
Yeah, I think we all know that, really, don't we?
Yeah, definitely.
I just think the danger of focusing on whatever it is. Let's just say it's pH, for example. Is are you going to take your eye off the ball? Are you still going to check the? I mean, I think one of the things that people relax on checking, which is probably one of the key elements, is their salinity.
Yeah,
go off on tangents, doing other things, and getting obsessed with stuff. And then a lot of the time, if your salinity drifts, every single thing in your tank is out. So it's key.
Yeah,
I've experienced that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people forget, don't they? They just forget.
No, I do. I couldn't agree with you more on that. And again, like I've said with the pH measure, it's like I've got 2 or 3 different ways of measuring my salinity because I like to make sure that I'm getting accurate information. And
that's one of the things I find amazing in this hobby, all the technology we got, and getting a proper accurate salinity reading is difficult. I think way more difficult than it should be for something which is just absolutely fundamental to a saltwater hobby. How salty is your water? You know, could be this, could be that. I've used every single method of measuring salinity, and you can line them all up from the Hannah pen right through to the floating hydrometer, and they'll give you different answers.
I couldn't use the Hannah pen because mine went in the bin months ago. So
yeah,
sorry to anybody that uses those. But yeah,
that's a whole other topic there.
It is.
I think the glass hydrometer. If it's a lab calibrated glass hydrometer, and you know the temperature that it needs to be measured at, I don't think you can get. You know, I think if you have an accurate salinity of your, I've got one as well that I regularly check it. I think on a monthly I'll check it. But if you, let's say, I don't know, it's calibrated to 25 and you're running your water at 26, get a measure of a known quantity. So if you measure out 10 litres of salt water, warm it up to 26, and then mark out on the hydrometer where it's going to sit, because obviously it's going to be slightly different to what the actual accurate number should be, and then pop it in your tank, you're going to get an accurate understanding, shall we say, of where your number's at. I think it's the best.
You can use there's an online calculator to adjust for temperature as well with those hydrometers, which is and to be fair, measuring a hydrometer should be at 25. Like I used a big Tropic Marine one, and it says I run my tank at 26. I'm agree out. If you actually look at the adjustment, it's minute,
minimal, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's not really, I mean, if you run your tank at, would you run your tank at 40, Tom, isn't it? You might need to
20. Well, I use them. To be fair, I have had issues with salinity on this for a bit. And it was the ICPs that I was getting back from Fauna. And to be fair to Doug, who was on earlier, and I already had it. The Milwaukee, the green. Go on.
Yeah, I know. We put the drop on. Yeah, I have one of them. Mine's in the bin.
All right, this is it. This is going to have to be next week's conversation then, clearly, because that is the most accurate bit of kit I've got in my possession today. That
right. Yeah,
it matches up with my ICP salinity reading on point every time I send an ICP off. It matches. Right. So, and the refractometer, and I tried the hydrometer that Josh is mentioning, and I was just going all over the place, and mainly because I obviously run the tank a bit warmer as well, and even the refractometer that's got meant to have got the automatic temperature, controller or adjustment or whatever, didn't make a difference. But to be fair to it like I say, it was Doug from Frag Farm who said to me on email, he said, out of all the ways of measuring salinity in all the years he's been in the hobby, that is the one bit of kit that has always been on point when he's got an ICP back. And I'll have to give him, I'll have to credit where it's due. It is. When I test my water, I get 0.26 and I send the ICP off and it comes back 0.26. Everything else is upside down, but the salinity's all right.
Yeah, you nailed that. Yeah. Obviously, I had a very different experience with my one. So,
all right, okay. Well, no, I just think it's a good. I know we're talking about salinity at the end of a pH topic, but I think it's something that people forget about, is that most ICPs, if not all of them, you'll get a salinity measurement. They'll measure it. And I just think people don't look at that. They just go straight to what's my nitrate, what's my phosphate. Yeah. Have I got any pollutant? And I just think that like you're getting a professional, again, I'm not going to go down that route to an extent, depending on which one you go with, but majority of them, you'll get an accurate professional lab reading that, if anything, that is your calibration fluid, in a sense. So what your tank should be at.
Pretty accurate. I take it they run that actually through the ICP, do they? Just get the salinity reading. So. I don't know. You would assume they would.
Right. Anyway. Couple of comments to finish with. So Mick's saying, if you all had the same equipment, the same poles, same everything, you could agree, but you haven't. So what works for you, stick with it. Yeah, I agree with that point. Yeah, as long as you know it's accurate. Otherwise, you might be sticking with something that's not. Ron's saying the inconsistency in salinity checkers blows my mind. I think we've found next week's topic. My personal favourite is the Hannah pen.
Boo!
Boo! Hiss. But trouble with the Milwaukee and countless. Oh, right. So he's had issues with that one. Same as you. Pretty bad news for the hobby. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And what's Dave saying? Depends who you use, Tommy. My salinity was well off with those who shall not be mentioned. Ooh. Right. On that note, we are wrapping up. Unless anybody wants to jump in with anything last minute. No, we're good.
No, I think we're good. Thanks everyone.
We all PH'd. We all PH'd out.
We are. Yeah.
Okay, right. So, yes, thank you everybody for tuning in and joining us this Sunday morning / afternoon. Go and enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and we will see you back here next Sunday for a topic, by the looks of it, about salinity. So, looking forward to that one, Rob. I'm sure you've got a few things to say about that, as always. But
burn some bridges.
Burn some more bridges. Not that I've burnt enough. Yeah, and I'm definitely not getting in at Aquarage, but I'll have to come in a disguise. Anyway, yeah, thanks for joining again, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll speak to you all next Sunday. Have a good one. Take care, guys. Bye-bye. Yeah.